You do this every day, and it's quietly stealing your strength. Not all loss is loud. Some of it doesn't announce itself with pain or illness, or a moment you remember forever. Some loss is so quiet that it blends into routine. It hides inside habits you've repeated for years without question. It lives in movements you stopped making, in pauses that became permanent, in comforts that slowly turned into cages. You wake up, you go about your day, you handle your responsibilities, and nothing feels dramatically wrong. And that's exactly why it keeps happening. This isn't about aging the way people usually talk about it. This isn't about becoming old, or fragile, or dependent. Most people listening to this don't see themselves that way at all. You still think clearly. You still have plans. You still feel like yourself. But there's a subtle difference between feeling fine and being strong. And that gap grows quietly when no one points it out. Strength doesn't disappear overnight. It leaks away in small, polite ways. It slips out when you sit instead of standing because it's easier. When you avoid the floor because getting back up feels awkward. When you hold your breath during effort without noticing. When you move less not because you can't, but because you don't need to anymore. Or at least, you think you don't. The habit that steals strength the fastest isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. It's comfort. Comfort that goes unchallenged. Comfort that becomes default. Comfort that slowly teaches your body it doesn't need to try. Think about how often during the day you choose the option that requires the least movement. You park closer. You carry fewer things at once. You ask for help with tasks you used to do automatically. None of these choices feel wrong. In fact, they feel smart, efficient, reasonable. But your body doesn't understand efficiency the way your mind does. Your body only understands demand. And when demand disappears, so does capacity. Most people believe strength is something you build only when you're exercising. They think it lives in the gym, in workouts, in routines they don't have time for. So when they're not exercising, they assume nothing is changing. But strength is being negotiated all day long. Every reach, every step, every rise from a chair is a conversation between your nervous system and your muscles. When you stop having those conversations, the system simplifies itself. It downshifts. It says, we don't need this anymore. You may have noticed that certain movements feel less natural than they used to. Turning quickly, balancing on one foot to put on a shoe, carrying groceries with confidence instead of caution. These changes often get blamed on age, but age is a calendar. It doesn't make decisions. Your daily patterns do. There's a moment that happens to almost everyone, usually without witnesses. You go to stand up, and for a split second you hesitate. You gather yourself. You push off with your hands. You don't fall, nothing dramatic happens, and you move on. But something important just occurred. Your body asked a question it didn't ask before. Am I sure I can do this easily? And when that question appears, strength has already begun negotiating its exit. Another quiet thief of strength is how we breathe. Not in a technical way, not in a medical way, but in a very human way. When movement becomes effortful, people hold their breath. When stress becomes normal, breathing becomes shallow. Over time, this teaches the body to move cautiously, carefully, tightly. Muscles that are always tense never fully engage, and muscles that never fully engage slowly forget their purpose. You might recognize this in your shoulders, your neck, your lower back, areas that feel stiff but also oddly weak. You stretch them, but the relief doesn't last. That's because the issue isn't flexibility, it's trust. Your body doesn't trust itself to move freely anymore, so it limits the range before you even notice. Strength is not just power, it's confidence at the physical level. It's the feeling that your body will respond when you ask it to. When that confidence fades, the body protects itself by doing less. And doing less feels safe in the short term. But safety that's never challenged becomes fragility. There's another daily habit that quietly steals strength, and this one is especially sneaky because it disguises itself as productivity. Sitting for long stretches without interruption. Not because you're tired, but because you're focused. You tell yourself you'll get up later. You just need to finish this one thing. Minutes turn into hours. When you finally stand, Your body protests with stiffness, maybe a little dizziness, maybe a sense of heaviness in the legs. You shake it off. You assume it's normal. What's happening in those long, still moments is not rest. It's disuse. Muscles aren't resting when they're not being used. They're being forgotten. Joints aren't relaxing. They're losing communication with the nervous system. The longer this pattern repeats, the more effort it takes to reverse it. And here's the part most people don't want to hear, but need to. Strength doesn't return automatically just because you decide you want it back. The body is incredibly adaptive, but it adapts in both directions. If you teach it for years that minimal movement is the norm, it won't instantly believe you when you ask for more. It will resist, not to punish you, but to protect you from what it perceives as risk. That resistance is often misinterpreted as, "I'm just not built for this anymore," or, "This is what happens at my age." Those beliefs are powerful. They shape behavior, and behavior shapes the body far more than time ever could. You might notice you've stopped doing certain things without making a conscious decision. You don't run upstairs anymore. You don't carry heavy objects close to your chest. You don't twist quickly to look behind you. None of this happened because of a single injury. It happened because over time, the body learned avoidance. Avoidance feels wise. It feels like listening to your body. But there's a difference between listening and surrendering. Listening means adjusting while staying engaged. Surrendering means stepping back entirely. Another habit that quietly steals strength is outsourcing effort whenever possible. Letting machines do the work your body once did. Automatic doors, elevators for one floor, tools designed to minimize physical involvement. Again, none of these are bad, but when they replace nearly all natural effort, the body forgets how to participate. Think about how often during the day your hands actually grip something with intention. Not scrolling, not tapping, but gripping, carrying, holding, supporting. Grip strength is one of the earliest indicators of overall physical decline, not because the hands are special, but because they reflect engagement with the world. When you stop using your hands with purpose, it often means you've stopped using your body with purpose too. Strength also fades when you rush, when every movement is done just fast enough to get it over with. Rushing teaches the body to cheat, to rely on momentum instead of control, to skip stabilization. Over time, the muscles that keep you steady stop being invited to the task, and uninvited muscles don't stick around. You might feel this when you step on uneven ground, a moment of uncertainty, a quick correction that surprises you. That's not clumsiness. That's a system that hasn't been asked to practice balance lately. Balance is another thing people assume they either have or don't. But balance is a skill, and like any skill, it fades when unused. Standing on 2 feet all the time doesn't train balance. It maintains survival. Balance lives in small challenges. Reaching while standing. Turning your head while walking. Shifting weight without thinking about it. When life becomes too predictable, balance has nothing to do. There's a quiet emotional side to strength loss as well. When you stop trusting your body, you stop asking things of it. When you stop asking, you stop expecting. And when expectations drop, so does identity. You may not say it out loud, but part of you starts to think, "That's not for me anymore." That thought is heavier than any physical limitation. It shrinks your world, it narrows your choices, and it often arrives long before it's truly necessary. What makes this so frustrating is that none of these changes come with a clear warning. There's no moment where someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "This habit you've had for years is slowly costing you." Life just keeps going, and because the decline is gradual, it feels natural. But natural doesn't mean inevitable. The body is incredibly responsive when given the right signals. It doesn't require extremes. It doesn't demand perfection. It responds to consistency, to reminders, to being invited back into movement. Reversing the quiet theft of strength doesn't start with a program or a plan. It starts with awareness, with noticing how often you choose ease over engagement, with asking yourself simple questions throughout the day. Could I stand instead of sit right now? Could I carry this instead of splitting it into 2 trips? Could I slow this movement down and feel it instead of rushing through it? These questions aren't about punishment, they're about reconnection. They remind the body that it's still needed, still capable, still part of the conversation. One of the most powerful things you can do is reclaim transitions, standing up, sitting down, getting in and out of the car, getting out of bed. These moments happen every day, and most people rush through them without thought, but they are rich with opportunity. When done with control instead of momentum, they become strength practice, disguised as life. Another subtle shift is letting your body experience variety again. Different speeds, different surfaces, different directions. Walking the same route every day at the same pace is comfortable, but it teaches very little. Changing small variables reawakens systems that have been on autopilot. It's also important to stop interpreting discomfort as danger. Mild effort, a sense of muscles working, a temporary feeling of fatigue. These are not signs that something is wrong. They are signs that something is happening. The body needs contrast to remember what it can do. Of course, this doesn't mean ignoring pain or pushing recklessly. It means understanding that not all sensations are warnings. Some are invitations. There's a quiet pride that comes from realizing you can still do things you thought were slipping away. Carrying something heavy without bracing yourself mentally. Getting up from the floor without planning it in advance. Catching yourself when you stumble instead of panicking. These moments rebuild trust. And trust rebuilds strength faster than any routine ever could. If this message is resonating with you, if you're noticing these small habits in your own day, that awareness matters. It means you're paying attention, and attention is where change begins. This channel exists for that reason. Not to scare you, not to tell you what you can't do, but to help you see what's been happening quietly so you can choose differently while you still can. If you want to keep that clarity, if you want reminders like this that help you stay in control of your body instead of slowly handing that control away, take a moment to like this video. It helps this message reach people who don't yet realize what's slipping through their fingers. And if you haven't subscribed, consider doing that too. Not as a favor to a channel, but as a commitment to yourself. A signal that you care about staying capable, aware, and independent for as long as possible. Strength doesn't vanish suddenly, and it doesn't return suddenly either. It responds to daily choices, quiet ones, ordinary ones, the kind you'll make today without anyone noticing. The difference now is that you see them, and seeing them changes everything. And seeing them changes how you move through the day. Because once you notice how strength leaves quietly, you also start to notice how easily it can be invited back. Not in dramatic ways, not with loud promises or radical changes, but through small moments that suddenly feel meaningful again. You begin to notice how you get out of a chair, whether you lean forward and push with your legs, or collapse into momentum and hope for the best. You begin to notice how you walk across a room, whether your steps feel placed and intentional, or rushed and disconnected. You begin to notice how often your body is simply being transported from one place to another, instead of actively participating in the journey. This awareness doesn't make life harder. It actually simplifies it, because strength, real strength, was never meant to be something separate from daily life. It was never supposed to live in a special hour of the day, or in a specific location. It was always meant to be woven into the ordinary. There's a moment that often surprises people when they start paying attention like this. They realize that their body isn't as fragile as they assumed, that many of the limits they felt weren't physical walls, but habits reinforced by caution. When they slow down a movement instead of rushing it, it feels steadier. When they engage their legs instead of their hands, standing up feels more confident. When they breathe instead of bracing, effort feels lighter. This doesn't mean everything suddenly feels easy, but it does mean effort starts to feel honest instead of threatening. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Fear accelerates decline. Not dramatic fear, but subtle fear. The kind that makes you avoid certain movements just in case. The kind that whispers, "Don't risk it," even when the risk is small and manageable. Over time, that fear trains the body to expect weakness. and the body, being loyal, complies. But confidence works the same way in the opposite direction. When you show your body that you're willing to ask a little more of it, gently and consistently, it responds. It doesn't need convincing speeches. It needs experience, repetition, proof. This is why people are often shocked by how quickly certain abilities return once they stop avoiding them. Balance improves when it's challenged. Strength returns when it's invited. Coordination sharpens when movements are no longer rushed or outsourced. You may start to notice that the floor doesn't feel as far away as it used to, that turning your head while walking no longer throws you off, that carrying something slightly heavy feels satisfying instead of alarming. These are not coincidences. They are feedback. Your body saying, I remember this. There's also a quiet mental shift that happens alongside this physical one. You stop seeing your body as something that's slowly failing and start seeing it as something that's been underused. That perspective alone can change how you approach your day. Instead of asking, can I still do this? You begin asking, how can I do this well? That's a powerful shift. It moves you from preservation to participation. And participation is what keeps people feeling alive, capable, and present in their own lives. Not youth, not denial. Participation. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to chase performance or compare yourself to a version of you from decades ago. Strength at this stage of life isn't about impressing. It's about access. Access to your own independence, your own confidence, your own choices. Because when strength fades, choices fade with it. You stop choosing based on desire and start choosing based on what feels safe. That's when the world gets smaller. Not because it has to, but because it quietly does. The good news is that shrinking is not a one-way path. Expansion doesn't require dramatic effort. It requires intention. Intention when you move. Intention when you rest. Intention when you notice the urge to avoid something and gently question it instead. You don't have to do everything. You just have to stop doing nothing in the moments that matter. This is why the smallest actions are often the most powerful. Standing up without using your hands when you can. Carrying something close to your body instead of away from it. Pausing for a breath before effort instead of holding it. Letting your feet feel the ground instead of rushing past it. These actions don't look impressive from the outside. No one applauds them. No one notices them. But your body does. And your future self definitely will. One day, you'll realize that you move through your home differently, with more ease, more trust, less negotiation, that getting up doesn't require planning, that balance doesn't feel like a gamble, that effort doesn't feel like a threat. And when that happens, you'll understand something important. Strength was never gone. It was just waiting to be asked for again. If this way of thinking feels different from what you're used to hearing, that's intentional. Because most messages about the body focus on extremes. Do more, push harder, or accept decline. There's very little space in between. But that middle space is where most people live, and it's where the most meaningful change happens. If you want to keep exploring this space, if you want more conversations like this, that help you notice what's happening quietly so you can stay ahead of it, make sure you're subscribed. These messages are meant to be reminders, not instructions. Signals that help you stay aware before problems announce themselves loudly. And if this message helped you see something in your own day that you hadn't noticed before, take a moment to like it or leave a comment. Not just for the algorithm, but as a small act of acknowledgement. A way of saying, I'm paying attention now. Because attention is the first step toward control. And control, at the physical level, is what allows you to keep living on your own terms. You don't need to wait for a wake-up call. You don't need a diagnosis, or a scare, or a moment of loss. You already have what you need. A body that's listening, a mind that's aware, and a choice you'll make today in some small, ordinary moment. That choice may seem insignificant, but repeated quietly, day after day, it determines whether strength keeps slipping away unnoticed or starts finding its way back into your life, exactly where it belongs.